Last week I did something I never wanted to do. I shot an event using direct flash. The timing is pretty funny because I literally just made a video on how I'm not a fan of that style, but of course, as soon as I do that, almost as soon as I published that video actually, a luxury brand reached out to me and specifically asked me to shoot with direct flash. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of this style. I think it's a trend and all trends do pass. Personally, I have the belief that when you use flash, you should do your best to make it blend in with ambient light. Or in other words, make it look like you didn't use flash at all and make it look like what it looked like to actually be there. The direct flash trend really flips this on its head and explicitly highlights the fact that you are using flash. But here's the thing, it's not about me, it's about my client. And if my client wants me to use direct flash, as long as there's no real major ethical issues, I will do what my client wants because that is my priority. And so I took the job, excited to try something new, but I'm not gonna lie, even before doing the job, I had some reservations about doing things in a way I just don't really believe in. So going into it, I decided I would find a way that would work for me, where I could make my client happy, but do it just in my own way that I feel okay with. I received samples from the client from a past event that was with another photographer that only really had group photos shot with direct flash, so the compromise I decided on was that I would give them what they want, but surprise them by doing my own thing on top of that, the kind of stuff I'm known for. I mean, they did hire me for a reason. Shooting with direct flash is literally straightforward. See what I did there? But I'm not really used to shooting this way, so upon arriving to the venue, I decided I would do some test shots. I tried three things. First, with the diffusion cap pointed directly at the subject. And yes, I know this is not how you're supposed to use a diffusion cap, but it's okay to break rules. I thought it might just be a good balance of giving them what they want and me doing it in a more flattering way than I think the sample photos showed. Then I tried with the diffusion cap, used correctly at a 45-degree angle just for the hell of it, and then finally by pointing the flash directly at the subject matter. In the end, I just settled on using plain old direct flash because I actually thought it looked the best. But in order to get the images in line with the samples my client provided, I quickly realized that it was best to set my exposure compensation on my flash to a +1. But this did create a bit of a problem. Not a big one, but an inconvenient one nonetheless that really messed up my flow. See, the way I like to shoot a room like the one I was in is to more or less set my exposure to properly expose for the ambient light and then use my flash with the compensation of about -1. This is different than simply just dragging your shutter in order to get your background lights to where you want it. Rather, it's exposing your image correctly for the ambient light and then setting your flash exposure compensation to about -1. When shooting this way, you can kind of think of your flash as a fill light. It's there to improve the quality of the light on your subject, not so much just to get a proper exposure. Real quick, here's a few examples of me just shooting with available light. It can be done with the right gear. It does look like what it was like to be there, but it's not necessarily the most flattering for your subjects. In this room, it looked pretty good, but it depended too much on where I was shooting and just wasn't consistent. By introducing a flash as a fill light, it just gave me more consistent results. So going between shooting group photos with direct flash and the candids in the style I actually wanted, I had to fiddle with my flash each time going from -1 exposure comp to a +1 exposure. Eventually I did find my flow, but I was surprised by another thing that felt kind of like an ethical dilemma. See, I have a really strong work ethic. I always give my best to my work and I never phone it in. And just doing something in a way I felt was an inferior way of working, it made me feel like I was doing something wrong. And it was hard to shake, to be honest. Eventually, I did make peace with it. But you know what? When it comes to this style, I kind of get it. Images shot this way, for now at least, kind of stand out. It's nostalgic, it has a red carpet glamour to it, and in a weird way, I think images shot this way feel special to people because they get to feel like they're the subject of the paparazzi, which is very common in LA, wanting to feel that way. Or perhaps when you use direct flash, it just sort of creates a veneer from your average snapshot, sort of separates it from your typical image. But in the end, a trend is a trend, and all trends do pass. If you're a photographer shooting in this way, will your work look dated down the line? To some degree, I think yes, but like everything, when done in moderation, I think you'll be okay. But will I personally continue shooting this way? Well, no, but maybe. I just can't really go against my beliefs, but perhaps there is a third way. I like shooting with two camera bodies, and so I toyed with the idea of using two cameras each with their own flash, but I've always just found that to be a bit cumbersome, and it really wouldn't be any less inconvenient than going back and forth between -1 and +1 exposure compensation on a single flash. But then I remembered that I also packed my X106 and a Godox IT30Pro flash in my bag. The IT30 is a fully featured flash. It has TTL and exposure compensation, and actually it can even be used to trigger other flash units. The only missing feature is that you can't really bounce it without an adapter, but for what I needed it to do, it was absolutely perfect. I paired it with my X106 because I could just sling it over my chest and I hardly felt the weight of it at all. This made it really easy for me to just do my thing like I normally would, and when I wanted to shoot a group photo, I would just grab my Fuji. It was an extremely effective way of working that did not feel inconvenient at all. And I'll say this, although I don't think the X106 is an ideal camera for professional work, for example, the EVF really struggled in low light, I found that the look of the images, and I'm not even talking about the Fujifilm simulations, actually kind of lent itself to, I think, what's popular right now. I found it novel and kind of fun to use, which allowed me to realize that perhaps the best way to wed my beliefs about serving my client and giving my client what I felt was my best work would come in the form of carrying the X106 slung over my chest just to grab these shots. And this way I can easily give the client and probably the participants, if I'm honest, what they want without feeling like I'm compromising on the quality of photography I provide. So basically, as a bonus, I'm just carrying this camera around. So going forward, I am considering doing this again. And so here's my final thoughts. If you're an experienced photographer and you want to give it a shot, go for it. As far as trends go, I get it, I don't love it, but it's not so bad. But just know what you're getting into. It's a trend, and all trends pass. But if you're a new photographer, maybe coming up in the era of this trend, know this. Direct flash is easy. You can't really mess it up. But learning to use your flash effectively to make it look like you didn't even use flash at all, that takes knowledge and skill. But the look of those images will be timeless. So I was a bit surprised that in making this video and shooting in this way that my feelings on direct flash have evolved. But I'd really love to hear what other people think, so I hope to see you in the comments.